Mr. Speaker, once again, thank you for the opportunity to make a contribution to this appropriation bill debate. Quite apart from expressing my total support, I want to commend our captain for really batting a captain's innings. Your contribution, Mr. Prime Minister, was second to none and provided the gateway for your soldiers to contribute and take the lead from you. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there has never ever been in the history of this country a budget address that finds embrace with all and sundry. This year is no exception. But you know what, Mr. Speaker, Deputy? When and if you identify what you label as a hardship, you need to juxtapose it in honesty with all the relief that was enunciated. But you see, it is the hypocrisy that kills me. The hypocrisy. When the Honorable Prime Minister announced the 12.5% removal of VAT on building materials, being plywood, lumber, galvanized steel and blocks, the leader of the opposition sat in his chair and in a very hypocritical and conniving way gave the Prime Minister the thumbs up. Yes, he did. You know what he did, Mr. Speaker? He had barely left the steps of this august chamber when he resorted to social media, having commended the Prime Minister on one hand, went blasting this very Prime Minister for the 2.5% health levy, Mr. Speaker. That is what he did. He had instantaneously forgotten that there was a 12.5% relief. He wanted to cause some political sensationalism. What he never said, Mr. Speaker, and what he withheld was the fact that the 2.5% levy was not applicable to groceries. He never said that. He never said the price of food will not raise based on that levy. And I want to say this. When he was Prime Minister of this country, prices of groceries skyrocketed. What did he do? Absolutely nothing. Rather than doing something, Mr. Deputy, he actually removed the subsidy on rice, flour, and sugar. That is what he did, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, sometimes you wonder why you have those kinds of people around. Now, I would have said no more, Mr. Speaker. I would have said no more on this 12.5% and 2.5%. But in jogging my memory, I certainly remembered Statutory Instrument 80 of 2020. And guess what? That law, that statutory instrument, was passed about 1 o'clock in the morning. Let tout je cette l'ici qu'a dormi. Gouvernement qui était à bas, leader of opposition naturellement, yo passé en loi. And you know what they called it, Mr. Speaker? They called it the Public Health Offences Act or something of that sort, Mr. Speaker. If you just permit me a couple seconds, let me find my copy. It is there, it is there, it is there. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have it with me, and I can make it a document of the House. Pass this piece of legislation at 1 o'clock in the morning. Les sétliciens, les autres tout te qu'à dormir, les autres tout te en faux sommeil. En l'année juste avant l'élection, à bas, même pour Mikou South, yo te pas vle passer en loi pour mettre au licence pour faire boudin. Yo te vle pas son loi pour mettre licence pour faire charcoal. Yo te vle pas son loi pour faire bloc. Yo te vle pas son loi pour faire charbon. Yo te vle pas son loi sous café fiberglass. Yo te vle pas son loi sous café mécanique. Yo te vle pas son licence sous café hairdressing. Processing fish. Everything under the sun. Poisson, sous ka process poisson. Sous ka waje jewelry ou brise licence. Sous water recycling ou brise licence. Sous ka fait travail asbestos ou brise licence. Sous ka spray machine ou brise licence. Sous ka potwe by moon ou brise licence. All of those, Mr. Speaker, passed at 1 o'clock in the morning, when 99.9% of St. Lucians are asleep, under the leadership of the member for Miku South. And today he has the audacity to talk about a 2.5% levy on for health. Mr. Speaker, you know, again, it comes back to the hypocrisy. But that in a nutshell speaks to the untruths with which the people of this country are being fed. And it is being done just to get to cause political sensationalism in the hopes of gaining some political advantage. But you see, Mr. Speaker, I listened to the member from Miku North, and I want to say, Miku South, sorry. I want to say that, you know, politics don't make anybody a liar. Politics don't make anybody a crook. Politics don't make anybody what you are not. What politics does, it brings out your true colors. It brings out your true personality. It exposes you. That is all it does. Samaka dia sou se have overlay, se voler, pas politics qui fait voler. Sou ma chose, ou ka di ma chose, c'est ma chose ou ka di, pas politics qui a fait ça. Politics does not implant any genes in anybody, Mr. Speaker. So, oh yes, it was the member from Miku North who said that, Mr. Speaker. Yes. It does not make anybody dishonest or deceptive or fraudulent. It brings you out. Because don't tell me, Mr. Speaker, you have both the member for Swazel, and by the way, he did absolutely nothing in Swazel, permitted the people to use the community center as a storage area. And today, he has the audacity to talk about projects for his constituency. They sit here in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, forgetting they were the duo who signed the DSH deal. They were the duo who leased the land to T.R. King at $1 an acre for 99 years. They were the duo who permitted the opening of an account overseas, and the balance of the monies remain that of T.R. King. They were in cabinet when the brother-in-law of the then manager of National Housing Corporation got land in Marigo Bay at less than $2 a square foot. They were in cabinet when they approved land for sale to a colleague member of the cabinet at 67 cents a square foot. All of them were there. All of them were there. But today, you know, 67 cents. Today, they cry foul, Mr. Speaker. They are crying foul. Why? I don't know, Mr. Speaker. And she said it was too expensive at 67 cents. You know? And when a St. Lucian buys land through an esteemed lawyer, you have a problem with that. Trying to label the transaction as a scandal. You know? Hypocrisy. What is worse, Mr. Speaker? What is worse in the things that duo have done is that the leader of the opposition now, quite understandably, was described by a regional prime minister as not too bright. But you know, the member for Swazel came into politics with a banking background, a background which ought to impose on him, Mr. Speaker, that need to know better. A background which demands due diligence and the ability of whoever you are dealing with to execute the program that they propose they will. And within less than 6 weeks, as a banker, within less than 6 weeks, you came in, signed an agreement on behalf of this country, which is quite disadvantageous to us. Had he signed that when he was a banker, he would have been fired instantaneously, Mr. Speaker. And those are the kind of people today who pride themselves on being concerned, certainly, about the people of this country. But you see, when they operate with apathy, they operate with the apathy of resources that belong to the state. He went on to say, Mr. Speaker, that we are enjoying growth, far less if we did not stop projects. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the member for Swazel, in whatever hole he has recused himself, reduced to listening to this debate. He is indeed, that as soon as the United Workers' Party won the elections, they actually went on a stoppage tour. They went on a stoppage tour. They did around the island with the captain of the leader of the opposition as captain, and they were just stopping things left, right, and center. They reached Soufre, stopped the square, and after they stop it, hand it to a different contractor. The airport, they stopped it. They stopped it and traded what was a PPP, Mr. Speaker, for us putting a heavy debt burden on the backs of St. Lucians of over $500 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, you know, those untruths that we tell in this chamber. I was downstairs, and I want to apologize for my absence during most of the presentation of the leader of the opposition, because, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, my tolerance for absorbing lies, really, I have a short fuse. I really have a short fuse for that, and for fear that I would have constantly, I think I do, constantly interfered with the leader of the opposition's presentation, I preferred making myself absent. But the leader of the opposition, again, in his deceitful and dishonest manner, said that the airport project, they were on budget. But, Mr. Speaker, I can make it a document of the House. I am reading from a consultancy report that was prepared to guide this government. And on page 16, foundations. It seems they have this thing about foundations, Mr. Speaker. They have this thing. You remember St. Jude started at 3 million, ended up at 9 million? They have the thing. They have this thing for a foundation. You can hide the money underground. Foundations, Mr. Speaker. The very leader of the opposition who was prime minister. It says, and I quote, a very significant part of the foundations for the new terminal was executed at a value that had been estimated more than 18 million US. And here this, Mr. Speaker, foundation package was supposed to have costed $1.8 million US. It ended at 19 million US. leader of the opposition à Dikosa, Airport Nefla, yo ale target. Fondation, ek yon yo bagay ek fondation. Because même là yo de fait St. Jude, fondation commencé à 3 million, it end up 9 million. Fondation Airport là, yo te estimé at 1.8 million US. It ended up at more than 10 times the amount, being 19 million US. That is over 1,000%. 1,000% cost overrun. And my instructions are because the man who does not care about money just say change this, change this, change this. And that is what we have, Mr. Speaker. That is what we have. You know, and then they talk about stoppage, Mr. Speaker. The audacity of those people, Mr. Speaker. The audacity of those people is unbelievable. Unbelievable, Mr. Speaker. You know, now I heard again the ranting from the member for Swazel about sandals, and it's not something I suspect none of you all picked it up. Sandals, the member for Viewfort South picked it up, but there was something surreptitious that he did and said. You know, sandals and this $24 million. Now I want to say this, Mr. Speaker. A disclaimer here, I actually like sandals. I like the contribution they make to the economic development of this country. I like the significant indentation that they cause in our unemployment rate. So I have no problems with that. As a matter of fact, Mr. Sanders, the CEO, Mr. Anderson, is a very good friend of mine. But I want the member for Swazel to know that he cannot fool us. The only person who he can fool is the man who sits to his right. But he can't fool us. It is a fact, Mr. Speaker, that they waived the $24 million on 9 million US. But you know what he did, Mr. Speaker, which was quite disingenuous? He brought, Mr. Speaker, a missive to this house. He brought a missive to this house and attempted to use it to justify why they waived the money. And what is very conniving, Mr. Speaker, he reads from it all the contents as if the contents are factual. Let me repeat that. He reads from this. That is not a birth certificate that carries a registered stamp from the land registry. He reads from this missive as if the contents are factual. But Mr. Speaker, the article has no author. It has no author at all. No author. You know, the source of this is unknown. So it is a highly opinionated missive. And if you ask me, it was written with somebody's heart who is on one side. And for all you know, that may have been written by the member himself. The member himself may have written that. So he may have written it, and then he quotes from it as though his opinion can instantaneously transform into a factual basis. You know, so when they believe they can fool people, Mr. Speaker, they can't. They can't. And that, I would dismiss it as Powell Bolawi. No author. Same ones, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want us to look at our performance as a government in its first full financial year. Mr. Speaker, we know that for the financial year 2021-2022, we enjoyed economic growth of about 15%. And let them know, it is not Philip J. Pierre, it is not the cabinet of ministers that had any kind of input in the preparation of the data on which we rely. The only input we had as a government, is our performance. Only our performance, Mr. Speaker. So 2021, 2022, we enjoyed economic growth of about 15%. This last financial year, Mr. Speaker, when the numbers are finally tabulated, we are fetching growth of in the region of 18%. Our growth of 18%, Mr. Speaker, and only this morning I said, Mr. Prime Minister, you have to keep growing. And he said at some point, you stop growing. But, Mr. Speaker, 18% is second in the Caribbean, second to Guyana, with its global discovery of oil. On page 9 of our economic review, our growth rate is ranked number 7 in the world. That is how we are doing. The perception of this country being free from corruption has increased by 13 percentage points, Mr. Speaker. The country was seen as the most corrupt in its history under the leadership of the member for Miku South in 2017. Mr. Speaker, if we remain on that trajectory and add another 13 percentage points, we shall find ourselves in territory where we were once before, because it was under the prime ministership of the member for Miku North that the perception reached its all-time high of 71%. And I must say, and that was between 2006 and 2011. Between 2011 and 2016, the government led by Dan Kenny Anthony maintained that 71% throughout the 5 years. Throughout the 5 years. But in 2017, we dipped, Mr. Speaker, by 31 percentage points, bringing us to an all-time low of 14%, making 2017 the most corrupt year in the history of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and then they call people criminals and corrupt and this and that. I've always told them, when you have all those adjectives to describe others, look closer to whom? Look closer to whom? Because right in your backyard, all the descriptors you use, you can find within your circles. Unemployment, Mr. Speaker, fell from 21.9% in 2021 to 16.5% in 2022. Our debt to GDP fell from 85.9% to 69.8%, Mr. Speaker. And guess what? Another takeaway from last year, Mr. Speaker, is the constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment to ensure that no other prime minister abuses the constitution like the last prime minister that this country had between 2016 and 2021. Mr. Speaker, when you have a country, Mr. Speaker, and we can't deny that, we have a country of predominantly black people. We are black people. We are black country. But when a prime minister can open his mouth on television and says that he lose the elections because his class did not support him, persons who follow him need to be very, very careful. In other words, he's saying, Mr. Speaker, you all are not of my class. That is what he's saying. That is what he's saying. So, but Mr. Speaker, when you compare the economy of this small country of ours, we as a small island, we did better, much better than advanced economies in the world. We did better than the UK. We did better than Canada. We did better than Japan. We did better than China. And so I see the member for Castries is the Minister of Finance. The Prime Minister deserves a round of applause. And this growth, Mr. Speaker, did not happen fortuitously. It did not happen by accident. It happened because there was very good, prudent, and financial management, sound financial decisions. You know, Mr. Speaker, that manifested itself unprecedentedly in a senior civil servant overtly disclosing that for once the country is under good hands and they are experiencing better financial management. When a civil servant can say this, Mr. Speaker, you know something good is happening. And rather than being grateful to that kind of leadership, that kind of deliverance, Mr. Speaker, came through by the Almighty, giving the member for Castries the authority to deliver. Rather than accepting and embracing the positive changes, not only do they lay claim to the changes, but they also call him all sorts of names, Mr. Speaker. And over the weekend, yesterday in fact, they christened him even with a new one, Mr. Speaker. When I hear a former Prime Minister saying that the J in the current Prime Minister's name represents Joker, we are not like that, Mr. Speaker. We are not like that. And although his name is Alan Michael Shastney, I will never ask anyone, I will not, and I will not urge anyone to say that his A stands for autistic. Nobody should say that. Nobody should say that, Mr. Speaker. But sadly, that is where our country has gone. You know, a performing government versus an opposition that is so desperate that it thrives on deceit, dishonesty, fraudulent misrepresentation, untruths and insults. And Mr. Speaker, you saw an example. You saw an example. A leader of the opposition putting up a value of one parcel of land, saying that it was subdivided, but the amount remains the same. He can't. Even a school child knows that you have 100. Even if you take out one from the 100, you have 99 left. You cannot have 100 left. Only the leader of the opposition knows how to do that kind of maths, Mr. Speaker. And that's what they thrive on, Mr. Speaker. And some of those people is just follow the leader. Mr. Speaker, they continue to make all wild assertions, even in the face of empirical data, even in the face of documentary evidence to substantiate what one is saying, which refutes what they say. They still proceed. Right now, I'm hearing a new one. It is a footpath. Yeah. A footpath. Today, it was the same amount of land, but all of a sudden, the amount that was removed was a footpath. Huh? So you have 100. You have $100. You give me 50 cents. You still have $100 left? That's the mathematics of a once Prime Minister of this country, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, continuing with our performance, our gross domestic product, and I know quite a few people might not necessarily know what it is. It is the value of goods and services produced in your country. In 2021, the gross domestic product was $4.8 billion. Last year, it rose by 30.7% to $6.29 billion, Mr. Speaker. And if that is not progress, I don't know what is. But you will hear the leader of the opposition and member for Miku South in his usual rant, nothing is happening, nothing is happening. The evidence is there. The evidence is there. You know, some of them pretend that they're living on Mars. They're living on Mars. They stay in all corners of the globe and tell you nothing is happening in St. Lucia. From New York to wherever, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. But you know, I will tell him what's happening, Mr. Speaker, if he doesn't know. And I wouldn't, you see, they rechristen everybody. They rechristen everybody. On page 54 of the PM's address, we will see that we had to find $4.2 million, Mr. Speaker. $4.2 million to rebuild custody suites. The one that existed was the largest prisoner holding facility in the OECS. And it was built by your humble servant when the member for Castries North was Prime Minister, and after my plea, he gave me the finances to have it constructed. You just demolished it and then talk about crime. Then hypocritically talk about crime. You know, Mr. Speaker, those kinds of financial decisions, to put it mildly, were outrageous. Outrageous. You know, up to now we don't have a proper prisoner holding facility. And notwithstanding all that kind of wastage by the last administration, the government was still able to find $37 million for social programs, basically geared at improving the standard of living of the poorer people in our country, Mr. Speaker. Confidence in the government has re-emerged. When you tell me, Mr. Speaker, persons who are owing the government, 95% of them, 95% of bondholders will agree for government to hold their money for a longer period, roll over the bonds. It speaks, Mr. Speaker, to nothing else but pure confidence, Mr. Speaker. That is confidence in this current government. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia is on the right track, and so is the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. We have heard the Honorable Prime Minister speak to the recognition of one of our local heroes, Julian Alfred. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister announced the issuance of a diplomatic passport to her. I want to take the opportunity of announcing that the National Housing Corporation has already identified, in collaboration with her representatives, a lot of land for Julian Alfred. This, Mr. Speaker, is done in recognition of her contribution in keeping St. Lucia's name alive globally. And I want to thank the member for Grosley, the gentleman sitting to my left, for the representation that he made on her behalf. My team followed up with lightning rapidity, and the transfer of title is in train. Mr. Speaker, that is what you call a meritorious entitlement. That is what you call a reward truly deserving. I cannot say the same, Mr. Speaker, when a sitting Prime Minister will ensure that the title of Sir is conferred upon him. Was that meritorious, or was it nepotism at its highest? You know, one has to question that, Mr. Speaker, because it strikes at the heart of nepotism. But you know, one who is seized of more facts will settle for nepotism, as this is not only the benefit conferred upon Daddy, when several other offices were rented by government from Daddy, you know, when your son was Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me close that meritorious chapter. But I want to commend all those persons who have been involved in Julian Alfred's training and whatever else. Those are the kind of people we need as ambassadors to this country. And you know, Mr. Speaker, whilst I'm on my feet, even if I did not script it, the hypocrisy of the leader of the opposition, the hypocrisy, it irks me, Mr. Speaker. I was downstairs when I heard him praising Julian Alfred. The very Julian Alfred who he deprived of $150 arranged by the member for Denry North, who was then Minister of Sports. He was ridiculed, Mr. Speaker. He was called all sorts of names. Minister's account, this, that, and the other. Today, that benefit has translated into national pride, and you believe you want to embrace it, or you were part of it. That is the hypocrisy I cannot deal with, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, they take credit for how we are doing now. I heard them last night. Oh, you don't run government by giving teachers money. Mr. Speaker, let me just say this. You know, I live and sleep next to a teacher. And Mr. Speaker, sometimes my construction workers have to go to a classroom to do repairs. And then they would call, bossman, we need paint. Bossman, we need a sheet of plywood. But you'd swear it's on my construction site they are. I have almost personally taken the responsibility of when school closes to put her classroom in order for her. You know, and then now we are trying to cause at least some egalitarianism, some equality. And you are talking about you don't run government by giving teachers money. That is the kind of heartlessness you have pervading the ambience that is enveloped as United Workers' Party. That is what it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to wastage, everybody knows the track record of the leader of the opposition. And whilst I will not regurgitate the numerous instances of wastage already enunciated by the member for Viewford South, but I want to remind the leader of the opposition, because I am replete with examples of his wastage, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when you tell me a Prime Minister drives around day or night, anytime, with two outriders, every day, to the point where some workers along the road Shasne Kapasi. That's the thing. Every day, Mr. Speaker. When you tell me that you drive a government vehicle, and from the time it starts, it does not go off until you reach your home, you retire for the day, because you always want a cool interior. When you tell me that you spend $11 million on incinerators, 11 million, Mr. Speaker, none of which have functioned for one day, what do you call that, Mr. Speaker? What do you call that? The European Union gave us a gift of OKEU. A gift. What do? You brought Cabe and City down here and gave them a contract for $25 million for 2 years, amounting to over $1 million a month. What is that? Isn't that wastage? Isn't that wastage, Mr. Speaker? Take $7 million and give to a company that did not have a clue about pharmaceutical procurement. Up to now, we don't get our money back. When you tell me on the last day, the last working day before the last elections, Mr. Speaker, the Star Publishing was paid $500,000 for derelict equipment. $500,000 for derelict equipment, Mr. Speaker, none of which we have used. You talk about wastage, Mr. Speaker. You talk about wastage, not to mention Pomandu 13 million, Lockerbie 32 million, Range 32, you know. Under your leadership, our rental expense doubled in 2 years, in one term. And Mr. Speaker, that's probably what they wanted me to do. At NHC, they wanted me to probably rent from what's the name of the place? Colony House. I bet you, if the property was sold and we took a 10-year lease on Colony House, you'd hear nothing. Nothing at all. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, you purchased the Dime Mall. You said you bought it for 30 million. You said we were paying interest. We spent a total of about $63 million on it. You gave it away for 13 million. And you talk about wastage? When they won the last election, the senior minister told me he had a very comfortable room. When he was told that they are swining in View Fort, for the first time, the man took everybody and brought to View Fort to be sworn in, red carpet on a playing field. And a room for every minister. The senior minister had a senior room. Isn't that waste? You just won an election, and that is the kind of extravagance you're already showing. And today you want to come and posture as though you have all the answers to what? To wastage? Yes. You know, engaging direct awards galore. 11 days before an election, a $70 million contract for Fresh Start to be paid in 1 year. And then the worst thing, Mr. Speaker, 1% interest per day. Are you hearing me, Mr. Speaker? 1% interest per day. So if Fresh Start sent in a bill of 28 million and we did not pay on time, $280,000 a day. You know, and today want to talk about wastage, Mr. Speaker. Those things don't go away, you know. They don't go away. And the man wants to take credit, Mr. Speaker, for the performance of the government. You know, like I said, I'm replete with examples, but one that was the recent discovery. The recent discovery, and it shows the luxurious lifestyle that the leader of the opposition lived at the hands of the people of this country. My point is, if you're rich, live your life as you want and personalize your expense. But everything that was being done is because the money is coming from the coffers of this country. Ask him to leave his vehicle on holiday now. Ask him to do that. Ask him to go in a hotel, and that was the one that took the cake to me. You are going to a hotel, Mr. Speaker, in England, Hamyad. You are going to a hotel, spending over $8,000 a night. $8,000 a night. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't show it, but we in ID too. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? There was a little bill for £24 of somebody who's matrimonially related to the leader of the opposition for laundry. Even that they passed to be paid by the government and people of St. Lucia. Even a laundry bill of £24. Laissez-le lycée. Même nom là qui a parlé that Yves Levier Premier ministre encore. Et qu'on plus si mieux ouais au bouik blanc là d'où il a marché parce que vous voyez ça. C'est même nom là qui a l'Angleterre et pour 6 souhaits dépenser $40,000 ça pour 6 souhaits. Gouvernement simplicité ni pour payer plus que $8,000 par souhait. Et mind you, la tenon moun epi, moun nan lave adli pour 24 ponts. 24 ponts. Yo me ale bil la tout. Yo me do bil lave ad pour 24 ponts. Ale do les set lisier. And this is what we had, Mr. Speaker. You know, and today, when you give him blows, Ernst & Young, another one again, Ernst & Young, you came into government. Our country, you see, always departs. We swear people in castries and we come into parliament and do our things safe cost, no, view fought, night for everybody. We have our people preparing the budget, no, leave that, Ernst & Young. For the first 3 years, you spent, and he was bold enough to say, Mr. Speaker, that it was about 1% of the budget. That's what he said. That's what he said. So if you are moving a budget of $1.5 billion, your tag is 15 million. And today, Mr. Speaker, he did it for the first 3 years when he recognized and realized that it is bringing a strain on the coffers of government. He resorted to the very tool, our humble, loyal, and hardworking civil servants, which he had initially discarded. He had discarded them, but he resorted to them because the financial belt was tightening. And today, you want to call their names and call them heroes. Call them heroes, but let them know you resorted to them. Low pattern l'argent. Let by even wed. You know, it's like a man has money initially and he goes big chef for dinner every night. When he start to go broke, Mr. Speaker, he goes somewhere, you know, he go by Falco for dinner. You understand? He goes by Falco. You know, they were not good enough for you. And today you want to hail them as heroes because guess what? One of the most difficult budgets that saw a preparation was after or during COVID, and they handled it. And I want us to give the civil servants a round of applause. All of a sudden they are heroes. You didn't know that? Hypocrite. Hypocrite. And you know, Mr. Speaker, it is that type of deceit, you know, that we are treated with. Look at the grocery issue, Mr. Speaker. Groceries. You know, and again, I don't think this man is good in head. Because, Mr. Speaker, it was made loud and clear that no food items will attract the 2.5% health levy. Yet you bring food items here and say they're expensive. You know? And I believe all of them came from Canada. I don't know if it's the massive bag he wanted to advertise. I don't know. But that is the kind of, and you know, some fools fall for it, sadly. That's the reality. Some people fall for it. You know, what are we producing here apart from the eggs that he brought here? Nothing. He didn't bring plantain, yam, nothing. No locally grown food. Pepper sauce. No locally produced. Mr. Speaker, people must understand that this Prime Minister, this government has no control over imported merchandise. We have no control over it. If we want it and we import it, we have to pay the associated cost. And there were supply chain issues that drove up the cost of importation products. We imported cement, we don't make cement. How can we determine the price of cement except to waive whatever revenue we may collect from cement? Those imported goods are beyond our control. But I don't know
Member
if
for Castro Central, you have 10 minutes left.
That'll be fine. That'll be fine, Mr. Speaker. That'll be fine, yeah. You know, he would say there and rant as though, Mr. Speaker. No, I need about 15 minutes, Mr. Speaker. 15.
Mr. Speaker.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to invoke Standing Order 3210 to allow the Honourable Member an extra 15 minutes to finish his presentation.
Honourable members, the question is that Standing Order 3210 be invoked to allow the member for Castro Central an additional 15 minutes in which to conclude his presentation. And now for the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. Ayes have it.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I was alluding to the kind of, it borders on being dishonest, Mr. Speaker. It borders on being dishonest. If you heard in the Prime Minister's address that the 2.5% levy is not applicable to groceries, you take the same groceries and you bring in this chamber, man. You know, to do what? To fool who? You know, it is clear that it will not apply to food. But I don't think he understands part where you have to speak Mandarin to him, because that's what he wanted to introduce in schools one time. You know, that is blatant dishonesty, Mr. Speaker. You bring in items like cheese, biscuit, eggs, you know. I believe, Mr. Speaker, the chamber was being used as some advertisement for somebody, you know, because nothing he has said has been further from the truth. Mr. Speaker, we are suffering in this country with an acute housing shortage. That's a fact. We are nearing 14,000 and growing. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, the general policy of this government is not to proceed with single family units. If we were to do that, Mr. Speaker, the housing shortage would grow by a faster rate than you can deliver those small units. In that regard, the National Housing Corporation, along with the NIC, are in conversation with an extremely capable developer who has visited this country, Mr. Speaker, with his team and has expressed interest in assisting us to deliver to the people. The generic drawing is currently in train for approval, after which, Mr. Speaker, the drawings, after which, Mr. Speaker, further approvals would be very, very easy. Once you have a generic drawing, you just get site approval and you are good. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to Proud, and I have to say this because, you know, this United Park and supporters of the United Workers' Party, they parade, Mr. Speaker, through social media a lot of untruths. A lot of untruths. And I want to read one in this honorable house, Mr. Speaker. I want to read one in this honorable house because, you see, they lie. And what they are hoping is that some of the lies will stick. Some of the lies will stick, Mr. Speaker. You know, for example, the leader of the opposition, when explaining, the man come with the block number. He forget they have the same block number. Mr. Speaker, over 1,000 pieces of land can have the same block number. They belong to one block. They belong to one block. They have the same identical block number. Yeah. Excuse me? Exactly. You must say identical block. And Mr. Speaker, that is when you are speaking to a gullible audience. That is what happens. And that's what he believed he was doing, speaking to a gullible audience. But Mr. Speaker, let me just read very quickly one of the posts of United Park. And it's on Proud. Mr. Speaker, when we assumed office in 2021, we reviewed the operations of Proud, and almost immediately, Mr. Speaker, engaged the UN Habitat to give us a sense of direction so that Proud can be effective, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in their recommendations of the UN Habitat, they suggested that Proud be made a statutory authority. The reason for that, Mr. Speaker, is twofold. One, there would be an autonomous body, and secondly, the rate of delivery of title documents would be expedited. Right now on the Proud, Mr. Speaker, for you to give somebody a deed of sale, the Governor General must sign. The Governor General has to sign. Once it becomes a statutory authority, they can sign documents and persons in this country can be empowered at a much quicker rate. But you know, the United Pact, Mr. Speaker, all this spew is nonsense. Nobody in Proud has ever been fired. And in fact, you don't fire a contractual worker. You have a contractual worker, the contract comes to an end, you seek to renew it if you desire, or people go their separate ways. People from Proud were fired. Targeting your humble servant. Proud is under NHC. I never heard more nonsense than that. I never heard more nonsense than that. And then, Mr. Speaker, they posted that one. From termination to triumph, the battle for Proud program ends in a major win. I don't understand. Following our recent discussion about the termination of Proud, nobody sought to terminate Proud. All of us decided the best thing is to go with the recommendation of the UN Habitat, make Proud a statutory authority. The AG has already commenced the legislative drafting. You know, but they go on to say, following the recent discussions about the termination of employees at the NHC. How can Proud employees be at the NHC? There was an emergency meeting. You know, it is the kind of nonsense that is perpetuated under the leadership of the member for Mico South. And all of that has to be wrapped around his head. It has to. So, Mr. Speaker, we are trying desperately to execute the program because our people need relief. But the current configuration is not working effectively and in a timely manner. You selling a piece of land 3,000 square feet and that has to go to the Governor General. Time-consuming exercise. But they will not understand it, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, what did the leader of the opposition say? 43%ers? You know? So, Mr. Speaker, those are the kinds of situations that we are confronted with. We have the situation where we are quickly running out of burial space. We are running out of burial space, Mr. Speaker, and this ministry, the ministry which I lead, is responsible for cemeteries. You know, not too long ago, we had to do something very quickly in Vieux Fort, and I've promised the district representative that I will collaborate with him because this financial year, God willing, we are hoping to bring in the relevant infrastructure in Vieux Fort Cemetery. Monrepo is on the right track already, Mr. Speaker, and so is the Northern Cemetery. And so is the Northern Cemetery, Mr. Speaker, which will be located in Bexar, Mr. Speaker. So, I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, that during the currency of this financial year, we shall commence some kind of work on the Northern Burial Grounds, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've made quite a bit of land available on the National Sites and Services Program. We have made lots available around the island, and I'm hoping with Proud becoming a statutory authority, I can assist my colleagues in a more rapid manner of them bringing relief to their people. As I speak, Mr. Speaker, we are undergoing a development in Ridgebois. The contract has been awarded. There's a lot of work going on there now as we speak, Mr. Speaker. There are 14 lots that have already been occupied, and we will be giving those people the land at a heavily subsidized price, and 46 new lots will be made available. Well, we know of the National Housing Repair Program. We are doing well in that regard, Mr. Speaker, bringing relief to the people around this country. Over 280 households have benefited. And Mr. Speaker, as early as probably next week, as the Prime Minister said, he has the key to the purse, but I know he'll open that purse to me so that we can continue to do goodies and to bring cheer to the good people of this country. Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping, as I said earlier, that in the next 2 months, I shall invite all my colleagues to the grand opening of the National Housing Corporation head office. First time in over 50 years that NHC will have an office. Mr. Speaker, I just briefly before I end want to just refer to a document prepared by the General Manager of SLASPA as to why they were not interested in this, Mr. Speaker. And it says in 2019, they engaged Ballas and Nidam to undertake a feasibility study. They went on to say, I'll just read excerpts, Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of this paper, the focus will be placed on cruise and cargo banan, since the aim is to provide an insight into why SLASPA did not act upon the offer to purchase block and parcel 0649 e-parcel 50, which had been offered by the NHC, and why the NHC, in need of immediate funding to obtain its own premises to house its offices, sold to another interested party. So basically they prepared that, Mr. Speaker, to say why they did not act on it, why they were not interested, and all of this, Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell is saying that to mitigate the current configuration of the land would be too expensive, that's one, and they even drew, Mr. Speaker, diagrams making the area a turning point, and they were saying it cannot work. It cannot work. So, whilst they did not tell me, in all fairness to them, they prepared a document and furnished the minister with it, Mr. Speaker. So when you hear United Park saying, you know, why you didn't advertise the land, excuse me? The very man who never advertised the Dahem Hall, the very man who did not advertise giving land $1 an acre, the very man who did not advertise giving Mary Isaac land at 67 cents a square foot, the very man that did not advertise giving the chairman's brother-in-law land at less than $2 in Marigot. But he wanted this advertised. Mr. Speaker, in closing, let me implore everybody to come to the Moshi Jazz. I live in Grosilo constituency. So we have the calendar. Babuno is first after the opening, and then we have Soufre, Peru on the 10th, and Moshi on the 9th. 9th? Babuno is the 6th. Take note, people, please come, all of y'all. Babuno is the 6th. Soufre 7th, Moshi the 9th. So they have 2 7s there.
Yeah, there is so.
Mais c'est mi côté pour aller laisser lycée. On allait toutes ces places-là. So, après Opnina, c'est Babouno. Après Babouno, c'est Soufré. Après Soufré Derisso. Après Soufré Derisso, c'est Monchi. And then Peru. You know, Mr. Speaker, we're going everywhere. Let's go, but I must be in Jazz Moshi. I have to be there because I'm a Moshinarian. Mr. Speaker, having said all of this, I want to thank the members of my team. A lot of times, Mr. Speaker, we as ministers or we as district representatives get the credit for every good thing that happens. And we forget that we are members of a team who execute on our behalf. In that regard, and I see one in the August chamber here, right here, Nikki Cauldron. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all those people who have contributed to me delivering both as a minister and as a district representative. I want to thank them for every bit of assistance, their unwavering support, and everything they have done to make me as a minister and me as a parliamentarian look good. With that, Mr. Speaker, I thank God, I thank the Prime Minister, and I thank my cabinet colleagues team for their cooperation. I continue, Mr. Speaker, to deliver to the good people of this country. Thank you.